Hello everyone, it's Mark here, and if you're watching this YouTube version of the quiz, it was most likely due to the fact that you were unable to join us at our live function, which took place on the evening of the 2nd of December at a very nice venue. So I'm sorry we didn't see you in person, but at least we get to share some quiz questions and give you an opportunity to see what was presented and how well you did. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through the quiz, and it's in a format whereby you can pause as you go along. So I will run through it quite quickly. It's going to be quicker than in a live setting because you have the opportunity to pause. What I'll do is I'll minimize my screen here so that you don't have to look at my face for the rest of the quiz, and enjoy it. And let's see as we go along how you do. Right, so it's the 2021 Cape Bird Club quiz, and it's, I think, my 4th or 5th year running it. Last year we had to do it entirely online, so it's nice to at least have some people attending in a live setting. All right, so fiddling with my mouse, which doesn't seem to be working. All right, so this is more important for the people attending in a live setting. I've got 10 categories, each worth 5 points, and there are 5 anagrams. You can score yourselves and see how well you do. I'd be very interested to get some feedback as to how things went. It's always difficult setting the questions and knowing at what level people are keen to participate, so it would be very useful to get some of your feedback. So I've allocated 1 point per question. There are 8 questions in bird distribution that are for half a point each, and the whole section is worth 5 points. The double up round is really for a competitive environment in a live setting, so you can ignore the double ups. I think just take the scoring as it comes. So this is also very relevant for a live setting where we had people hand in their score sheets. But most importantly, enjoy it. And I always set these quizzes with the intention that people have a lot of fun. It's meant to be educational, it's meant to be entertaining, and it's meant to be just a few photographs that I love sharing, stuff that I've taken over the years, and certainly not meant to be too competitive. So those are your categories. You can pause here if you want to just soak it all in, but I've got anagrams as I usually do, and I'll present those one at a time in between the first few sections. I've got a section on clubs and organizations, then on birders and birding and twitching. Then, as always, I have something on bird distributions. Which one is it? Endemic birds, birds and entertainment, magnifying glass, a new category that I've added, bum shots, and it's all in a name. And then a 5-question section called potluck, which comes right at the end. It's usually 10 points for potluck, but I decided by adding a few extra categories, I'd reduce it to 5. And just bear in mind that if you want to, you can pull out your Sasol or Roberts field guides, and you can use those if you think it'll help you. I think there are a lot of questions that they may not be of that much use, but at least you have that as an option. Right, the anagrams, as usual, I will give you a photograph of the habitat in which you'd find the bird. It does narrow it down a little bit, and as we go, we can help you out. So the best thing is to just either take a quick photograph of the page, and then you can work on the anagram during the course of the quiz or at the end before you get all the answers. And I think that will give you an opportunity to get them all right. The people in the live setting were given much less time to do so, but I think that's the nature of a competitive environment. Right, I've numbered every question according to its category. So anagrams is A1. It just helps people keep track, particularly with answer sheets, as to where they are. So this is the first anagram. That's a photograph of my son Adam on a jumbled rocky hillside, and you can see the setting is quite arid. So you would probably guess that it might be in a country like Namibia, and I feel like I might be giving too much away. So the anagram is fatal sulfur browse. So make a bird name with those letters. It doesn't have to fit 5 letters and then 7 letters and then 5 letters. It's obviously the letters are important. So it could be just a 2-word name, or it could be a 3-word name, but it doesn't match 575. Right, so there's fatal sulfur browse, and off we go. All right, the first section is clubs and organizations. There's a photograph of our mascot, or our title bird, which is a Cape sugar bird, and obviously our newsletter is named Promerops, which is named after the family name of our endemic family that we have in South Africa, which is sugar birds. All right, so the Omicron variant has thrown things into disarray once again, and who knows if we'll be going on flock. It's been such a difficult time, I'm sure, for all those involved in organizing it. And so if we go, then awesome, but if we don't, it's just one of those things. But this is a photograph of the first ship that we were meant to be going on. It was called it's still called the MSC Lyrica. We were meant to travel from Durban to Cape Town. That's all switched around. We've had 2 ship changes. We were going to be on the Musica, and now we are on a 3rd ship, which will travel from Cape Town to Durban. So please give me the name of the ship that we will be traveling on if you're going to flock. Question C2. The Cape Rock Jumper was the 2021 Bird of the Year. What is the 2022 Bird of the Year? And everyone will probably know that Cape Rock Jumper is my favorite bird in the world, so I'm sad to be saying goodbye to it, but we've got a really nice new 2022 Bird of the Year. It was announced on Birding Big Day on Saturday. And if you would like a small clue, it's a bird that you'd find not on mountainous fynbos, but in the ocean. All right, question C3, and this will be for the Cape Bird Club stalwarts. So if you've attended some of our Zoom meetings this year, this will help you a lot. So we had a 2-part talk from our dynamic club duo, Johan and Joy. The talk was called Around the World in 80 Days. They took us on a photographic journey through the Cape Bird Club's 8 international bird tours since 2008. Sadly, those are not happening at the moment, almost entirely due to COVID. So for a single point, name one of the missing destinations in 2012 and 2018. Question C4, for those that are big supporters of BirdLife South Africa, what is the strapline of BirdLife South Africa? Giving something wings. What is the missing word? And then, once again, very specific to our Cape Bird Club members, who is our newest committee member? Not so new anymore. Penny's been on, oh, I've just given that away. This lady has been on the committee for about a year now, and she's doing fantastic work on the committee, and we're very grateful to have her. She is responsible for youth and education, and she's often seen out on the weekends with some of the younger members of the Cape Bird Club, and really encouraging them to see a lot of great birds in our city. All right, so that's clubs and organizations. If you want to think about the questions for a bit, pause the presentation now, and I will move on with the answers. Right, now on to the answers for clubs and organizations. The ship that we will be traveling on flock to Marion is called the MSC Orchestra. And let us just hope that we get onto it and we get to see some of those open blue oceans. Question C2. Cape Rock Jumper was our bird of the year this year. Our bird of the year for 2022 is the Cape Gannet. That's a photo of a Cape Gannet in False Bay, a nice common bird, but obviously an indicator of the health of our oceans. Around the World in 80 Days, name just one of those 2 missing destinations. If you got 2 of them, well done. Unfortunately, no extra points for getting both. The answers are Ecuador and Thailand, and I wish I'd been on at least one of those trips back in the day, but unfortunately didn't get to go. And then the strapline for BirdLife South Africa is giving conservation wings. And our newest committee member responsible for youth and education is Penny Ditchmont. I think I did give that away. All right, here's your second anagram. That's an alien stand somewhere on the Cape Peninsula. And so it's a bird you'd expect to see in that habitat. It's not restricted to that habitat, but it certainly is most easily seen, I think, almost across the world in alien stands of trees in the Cape Town and Cape Peninsula area. So subpar housework afterwards. And once again, I will emphasize that these anagrams don't mean much. It just provides me with a whole bunch of letters that make up the bird names. Okay, the next section is birders, birding, listing, and twitching. This is a photograph of a bunch of birders in the Strand earlier this year, I think in about February this year. And we were all standing on these rocks looking at a lesser noddy, a bird that was debated for quite some time as to its identity. It was thought to be a brown noddy at one point, and then potentially an Atlantic black noddy, and then ultimately a lesser noddy, a great paper by Callan Cohen with a lot of research done, clarified all the features, and for many of us it was a life. It certainly was a new bird for me on my sub-region list. All right, so this is the most wonderful bird. I'm not going to ask you what it is. It's a Ross's Chiraco. What I would like to know is that it's been resident at a place called Cherinda Safari Lodge in Namibia. It's been there for about 2 years. I was lucky enough to see it earlier this year. And what I'd like to know is, what is the name of the river on which Cherinda Safari Lodge is situated? And often the Chiraco is seen feeding on fruiting trees on the banks of this particular river. All right, and our good birding friend Dom Rollinson, he's away in Saudi Arabia at the moment, seeing some great birds. So he's got an amazing ability to find rare birds, mostly because he's so good at birding and he's so diligent. He found this small bird in Marloth Park near the Southern Kruger. And I'm pretty certain many of us would not even have looked at this bird for a second time, but Dom was on his game and he knew it was something new immediately. So he identified it in the field, even though it had never been seen in Southern Africa before. What I'd like to know is, what is the name of this Palearctic warbler? And thanks to Cliff for sharing his photo. All right, these are the babblers of Southern Africa. There are 5 of them. And quite interestingly, on a trip to Namibia earlier this year, we saw all 5 species on a single trip. So what I'd like to know, I'm not going to tell you what the ones are that are in view. I'd like to know the one that's not in view. What is the name of the babbler that I have not given a photograph of? And this was an incredibly popular bird, also a bit of an ID dispute originally, thought to be just a European honey buzzard, but quite a lot of research went into establishing that this was in fact a new bird for the sub-region. And many of us got to tick a crested honey buzzard. It was extremely frustrating to try and see it. Lots of hours spent at a particular location. I spent at least 7 occasions there and saw it a few times, but at a very great distance. What I would like to know is, what is the name of the farm from where most twitchers observed it? So we would all have received Trevor's notifications, and he would have always said, the crested honey buzzard has just been seen at, and I'd like to know, what is the name of that farm? What was the location? And then this is maybe more Cape Town specific, and I suspect many people used this opportunity. So this was a wonderful Friday afternoon, bunch of birders in Kirstenbosch, not actually looking for birds. They were photographing something else that was incredibly exciting and very special. What was that particular thing that they were photographing? And this was all their expressions almost immediately after a sighting. Okay, so that brings me to the end of that category, and I'd like to run through the answers. So if you would like to have a few more minutes to consider the questions, I will suggest that you pause, but I'm going to go through them now. If you want to go back, you can always rewind. So I'm not going to rewind on my screen. I'm just going to go straight into the answers. Here we go. So this Ross's Chiraco has been resident at Cherinda Safari Lodge, and it is on the Kavango River. And the Angolans call it the Kubango. And if you named it the Okavango River, that is strictly speaking incorrect. The river is not called the Okavango River, it's called the Kavango River. And the Okavango refers specifically to the delta, But because I'm in such a generous mood and I can't see your answer sheets, if you said the Okavango River, I suspect you might just give yourself 1 point anyway. Okay, question T2. Sorry, the T refers to twitches. So I had to think of some very innovative ways to name all the questions. This particular Palearctic warbler is called a lesser whitethroat. And then the babbler I'm missing, so maybe just to fill you in on the babblers that I'm not missing, the one top left is the very special range-restricted one in northern Namibia. That's a black-faced babbler that was photographed at Roy's Camp, which is the best place in the world to see black-faced babbler. Bottom left is our endemic, our sub-region endemic, southern pied babbler. The bird in the middle at the top is the common garden variety arrowmark babbler, which is probably the one that most people have seen. The one at the bottom is a heartlobes babbler, which is restricted to sort of the river systems near the Okavango Delta and the Kavango River and the Zambezi River, mostly more sort of central Botswana, northern Botswana. And the one that I'm missing is the Angolan and Namibian endemic, the bare-cheeked babbler, which is quite easily seen in Etosha and north of Etosha and west of Etosha. This bird was photographed at a place called Hoboteri Lodge. All right, the location where this bird was most easily observed was called Spanish Farm, and there's a little red circle of the open patch that we all stood at for many, many hours, getting sunburnt and windblown. And the photograph bottom right is a photograph of a couple of twitches at Spanish Farm. And if you were not lucky enough to spend a few hours at Kirstenbosch in September, you missed out because there were 2 caracal kittens and a mother in Kirstenbosch for about 2 weeks, quite easy to see and really fortunate experience. All right, your third anagram is Fab Fathers Tucked. So write that down. This is a photograph of its habitat. This is a photograph taken near Sterkfontein Dam in, I think it's in the Free State, where it borders on KwaZulu-Natal or Mpumalanga. It's quite clearly high altitude grassland and rocky slopes. So that's the habitat in which you'd expect to find this particular bird. And relatively widespread in this kind of habitat, but pretty restricted to this habitat. Right, I had to pause for a second there because of the dogs barking outside, so apologies for that. I can't promise they won't start again. All right, moving on to the next category, which is bird distribution. So there goes. All right, the first 3 questions, what I'm going to ask you to do is match the bird in the photograph on the right to one of those distribution maps on the left. So all you need to do is give me an answer A or B. That bird on the right, you need to identify it, I guess, in order to know which distribution map it matches to. So this is bird number 1. Is that relevant for distribution map A or distribution map B? Then the second one is same principle. Choose the distribution map that is suitable for the bird on the right-hand side. And then the third version of that, once again, match the distribution map, A or B, to the photograph of the bird. Quite simple, really, but you might need to pause to give it some thought. And I'll move on to the next section, which is the other way around. I'm giving you two bird photographs, and I'm going to ask you which of those 2 birds matches the distribution map on the right-hand side. All right, next one, same principle. Which of those 2 birds on the left matches the distribution map on the right? You need to just give me an answer A or B. And then the last one, and this shouldn't fool anybody, which one of those 2 birds, A or B, matches the distribution map on the right-hand side? Okay, so allocating half a point each to those 6 questions. So 3 one way, 3 half a point for each of those. That's a total of 3 points. We have 2 more bird distribution questions for 1 point each. This one will need you to maybe pause and ponder. So what I've given you is I've given you 4 distribution maps, A, B, C, and D, and I've given you 4 photographs of the 4 sandgrass species that occur in the subregion. And what I'd like to know is which distribution map matches which bird. So you need to give me a letter and a number next to one another, and it's 1 point to get all 4 right. You don't get any points if you get any of those wrong. There are no half points. It's 1 point if you get all 4 of these matching pairs correct. So maybe pause here and ponder, and it would be cheating to look in your field guide because that'll give it away very easily. See if you can do it without the field guide. And then this is a question relevant for our trip to Marion Island, and quite an educational one because I think many people may not know this. So the bird on the right is an adult wandering albatross, and it's quite a mature adult, told by the obviously quite substantial white in the upper wings and a completely white tail. No black markings in the tail at all, which indicates a fully mature adult. An absolutely spectacular bird. This bird was photographed on the previous flock. And what I'd like to know is its breeding population is on an oceanic island, major breeding population. And there is a split species called a Tristan albatross, which is very difficult to separate from wandering in the field. Tristan albatross has its major breeding islands in a different ocean altogether. Of which of A or B does the wanderer breed most prolifically? So obviously A is situated in the Atlantic and B is situated in the Indian Ocean. And what I'd like to know is where would you most likely find the major breeding population of the wandering albatross? Is it A or B? If you know which are the island groups of A or B, that might help you a lot. All right, let's have some answers. Pause here if you want to ponder the questions again, and let's go. All right, this bird is gray-headed. It's got a blue belly. It's got a sort of a turquoise blue rump, and is a very sought after Namibian endemic. It's a Ruppel's parrot, and therefore the distribution map that is relevant is distribution map A. And the confusion species, and what I've tried to do is pair the confusion species. The confusion species is a Mayor's parrot. And although this is not a very good photograph at all of Mayor's parrot, you can see it's a brown-headed bird, doesn't have that nice deep red eye, and it's got a green breast and a greenish turquoise vent and rump. Excuse me. All right, this one, if you don't know the identity of this bird, you're going to struggle. This is a southern-billed ibis, which I think everybody that lives in Cape Town will know we don't get. So by process of elimination, you could have said, well, it certainly isn't A, and therefore it is B. And the confusion species I've selected is a glossy ibis, which everyone knows from Strandfontein and Brondeflay. It's a pretty common bird down here, whereas southern-billed ibis is certainly not the bird that we've ever seen down here. Question 3, maybe slightly trickier. This is a hurricane thrush. And for those of you that know your Cape birds, you'll know that hurricane thrush is not something that has ever been recorded in the Western Cape. As far as I'm aware, I'm just ticking over in my head. I don't believe there's ever been a record of hurricane thrush in the Western Cape. And given the dark green distribution map for species B here, it certainly can't be that, so it must be A. And the confusion species I've given is olive thrush, which is obviously a very common bird in the southwestern Cape and in the forested areas further north and east. Then we switched things around. We gave you 2 bird photos and the distribution map. And if we really wanted to be accurate, I would have put a little red cross down on the peninsula. The bird B is a yellow bishop. And everyone knows that yellow bishop is a bird that we see very regularly here down in Cape Town. So by process of elimination, you could have assumed that the answer to this is yellow crowned bishop, which is number A. And there's a vagrant or escaped yellow crowned bishop that's been regularly seen now at Lake Michelle in the Noordhoek area. And so strictly speaking, we could have a cross down there. All right, this is probably the trickiest one I threw at you. These are two very difficult looking birds. They are both cisticulars. And if you know your cisticulars, the slightly browner version of the birds at the bottom, and it has that sort of broad, creamy eyebrow. It doesn't have a black back. And I guess the habitat in which it's perched will tell you that it's a woodland species. The bird at the top is a much more common bird, and it is perched on a restio, which I think might give you an indication that it's a bird that you'd see in the Western Cape. It's not restricted to the Western Cape, but the map on the right-hand side does not show any occurrence of species B in the Western Cape. So you could probably rule it out on habitat alone. So the bird at the top is our common Levalin cisticular, and the bird at the bottom is the much more hard to find and special tinkling cisticular. So the answer to this question is B. So you can see the Levalin cisticular has got a distribution way down into the Cape, and tinkling cisticular doesn't occur in the Cape at all and is very thinly spread and a much more difficult bird to find. All right, and then this one, I guess, wouldn't have really troubled anybody. The bird at the bottom, everyone knows very well, and is incredibly widespread, particularly in Cape Town. It's an Egyptian goose, and we don't see pygmy goose, which is the bird at the top, anywhere near Cape Town, so you could have easily got this one as A. So you can see how widespread Egyptian geese are. It's obviously the Kalahari, it's not that prevalent, but pretty much everywhere else it's very common. And then we moved on to the one that required a lot of thought, and you worked very hard for your single point here, but it's quite useful to know where you get each of the sandgrass species. I'll identify them 1, 2, 3, and 4. So number 1 is the Namaqua sandgrass. Number 2 is Birchall's sandgrass, used to be called spotted sandgrass, which is evident by the white spots on its plumage. This is a male of the species. Number 3 is the most difficult to find of our sandgrass species. It's the yellow-throated. That bird was photographed near Sun City. And also quite widespread is double-banded sandgrass, which is the one at the bottom. So to match those up, A is Birchall sandgrass, so it's A2. That's sort of into Namibia and across the length of Botswana and in the Kalahari and the Northern Cape. And B is a double-banded sandgrass. You get it very commonly in Namibia, but you also get it across in the Kruger Park. So that would have given that one. C is the most difficult to find, and that very more localized distribution is yellow-throated sandgrass. And then, of course, the dry west sandgrass species is our Namaqua sandgrass, which is commonly seen in the Western Cape. And I think there was a sighting of one very recently in the West Coast National Park. All right, and then if you know your breeding islands, A is Tristan and Gough Archipelago, and the one in the Indian Ocean is Marion and Prince Edward. So the answer to this question is Marion and Prince Edward, and that is B. And as we hope to find out, Wandering Albatross has most of its world breeding population on the Marion and Prince Edward Island archipelago. All right, moving on to our 4th anagram. This is a photograph taken in the Meermal area. So that rocky formation in the background is called Kranskop. It's a wonderful spot for some of the sort of Afromontane specials, Barrett's warbler and bush blackcap. The habitat I'm specifically referring to in this photograph is the hilly grassland, not rocky grassland. It's hillside grassland and high altitude grassland. So that might help you identify this particular anagram. All right, which one is it? And you'll be very grateful that I didn't use these 2 species, because pipits are our toughest to identify group of birds in Southern Africa, in my opinion. The bird on the left is a plainback pipit, whilst the bird on the right is a Nicholson's pipit. I nearly said longbilled, but as everyone knows, the name has changed to Nicholson's pipit. So plainbacks on the left and Nicholson's on the right. That has nothing to do with any of the questions that you're going to get. It's not going to help you, but I just thought I'd illustrate how tough I could have been on you with that particular quiz question. All right, so what is this bird? Is it a pink-backed pelican A, or is it a great white pelican B? Is this an A, yellow-breasted Palace, or is it B, a Cherinda Palace? So you need to know which features will separate those two species. And often two birds confused, Temminck's courser and Burchell's courser. Which one of those two is this particular photograph? And then once again, two commonly confused lapwing species is black-winged lapwing and Senegal lapwing. So if you were driving around and you saw this bird, would you know immediately that it is one or the other, and which one is it? And in question 5, lemon-breasted canary A or Cape Canary B? Which one is that? So think about what the features are of each of those. I think I'm making this one particularly easy, so let me know what you think. All right, moving on to the answers. So pause now if you'd like to consider those again. This bird is actually a pink-backed pelican, and it's quite relevant because that was photographed at Strandfontein Surge Works. Another great bird found by Dom. It was found about 4 or 5 months ago at Sunflame, and they've now taken up residence on the pans at Strandfontein. So we get to see them quite regularly now, 2 of them. And its confusion species is great white pelican. And I've just inserted that photograph as well. If you can't tell it from the color of the bill and the plumage, you can certainly tell it by size. The size difference between great white and pink-backed is quite significant. Right, is this a yellow-breasted Palace or Cherinda Palace? If you know your palaces, the endemic sand forest Cherinda Palace has got a dark eye, and that should tell you straight away. So if you look at yellow-breasted Palace, it has that reddish ring around its eye, and that is a very, very important identification feature. The calls are very, very different as well. And so if you hear it calling, but you'll be grateful that I didn't play the call and make you identified on that basis. But Cherinda Palace has got a dark eye, whereas yellow-breasted Palace has that reddish ring around its eye. So this bird is a Cherinda Palace. Burchell's and Temminck's coursers. This particular bird was photographed near Piketberg in the Western Cape. We do get Temminck's coursers every now and again, but this is a Burchell's courser, with Temminck's courser showing the hind crown is rufous, whereas the hind crown of a Burchell's courser is grey. So those are 2 confusion species, and when seeing them and you're in a habitat where they both occur, which is what happens often in Namibia, it's important to know what those 2 features are in order to pick them apart. Their habitats are fairly similar, but Burchell's courser prefers far more arid environments than does Temminck's. And these lapwings can be very tricky to identify. This is meant to test you a little bit. The bright yellow eye and slightly more slender appearance and slightly longer legs proportionately will indicate that this is a Senegal lapwing. The bird on the right-hand side is a black-winged lapwing. This Senegal lapwing was photographed in Uganda. I've never photographed a Senegal lapwing with any success in South Africa. So I had to rely on that photo. Black-winged lapwing we get quite regularly around the St. Francis Bay area, and you get some nice photographic opportunities. So you can see that red ring around the eye, the different color legs, and different jizz. It's a much chunkier bird than is the Senegal lapwing. And then the last one, if you know your Cape Canary, you know that it has a gray head. This is also a nice adult lemon-breasted canary showing a very bright yellow breast. So that should have been quite an easy one. That's a Cape Canary at the bottom with that gray ear and mantle and yeah. All right, so that's section, which one is it? That is now done and dusted, and we move on to our final anagram. This is a photograph taken. It's not that easy to tell. It's the Homo floodplains on the Zaagkeldrift Road, on the far western side of the Zaagkeldrift Road. This photograph was taken in the prime time for Zaagkeldrift and Homo, which was February this year. And the bird in question is a bird that is most easily seen on those sort of floodplains in the background. So write all those letters down and start working on your last anagram. Blonde practice walking. All right. If you know me, you know that endemic birds are my favorite category. So here's a lovely forest canary, which is a Southern African endemic. And that was photographed in Kirstenbosch. It's a bird that's very regular in Kirstenbosch now. It never used to be, but it's probably the most reliable place to see it in the Western Cape. And we'll move on to endemic birds. Right, so which of these Franklin species is a South African endemic? So which one of these is a South African endemic? You need to identify the birds to know which ones they are and therefore whether they're endemic or not. So A, B, or C, I need the answer A, B, or C. You can take a guess if you don't know which ones they are. Tell me which one is a South African endemic. All right, this eBird distribution map reflects a bird species that is an intra-African migrant from Central Africa, but breeding exclusively in Southern Africa. What bird species is it? And the name is a dead giveaway, so that is a very big clue. And it's very interesting when thinking about this distribution map. Rufous-cheeked nightjar has got an incredibly similar distribution map. It migrates from Central Africa into Southern Africa, but it does breed outside of Southern Africa. So it does breed further north into Zambia and Malawi and potentially in Angola. This bird does not breed outside of Southern Africa. What is it? Right, very simple question, may not be a simple answer. This is a true South African endemic. So it doesn't occur anywhere outside of South Africa, not even in Swaziland or Eswatini or Lesotho. It is specifically restricted to South Africa, one of 18 bird species that is a true South African endemic. What is it? And if you've ever tried to see one, you'll know that it's very difficult to get a photograph. I'm very proud of this particular photograph. Took a lot of patience. All right, slightly more complex. These three birds are targeted specials when you travel to the Eastern Highlands of Zim. They also occur across the board in the same montane forest habitat in Mozambique, and one of them certainly does occur outside of that montane habitat in Gorongosa National Park. But two of them are restricted entirely to Zimbabwe and Mozambique, and one of them occurs elsewhere, very patchily in Africa. So it has a few other locations outside of Southern Africa. Which of these bird species is that one? So two of them are restricted to Zimbabwe and Mozambique. The other one is found in Zimbabwe and Mozambique in similar habitats, but it does occur outside of Southern Africa as well. So you need to identify the bird species. Quite a tricky question. All right, and then we have 5 long-billed larks. These are all of them. Eastern long-billed lark on the left-hand side. The reason I didn't ask you to identify them is because they can be very, very similar, as you can see from Karoo and Cape, and even a gallus does look a lot like each other. And then Benguela does seem to look a little different with its slightly plainer colors and a shorter bill. What I'd like to know is which one of these 5 long-billed larks doesn't occur in South Africa at all. Not Southern Africa, because they all occur in Southern Africa. One of them does not occur in South Africa at all. Another way to look at this question, which is not the way I've asked it, is 2 of them are restricted to South Africa, and the one is a little bit debatable. So a gallus is, I don't want to give away the question, but a gallus is restricted entirely to South Africa. So you know that that is not the answer. Which of the other 4 does not occur in South Africa at all? All right, and here are the answers. So pause if you want to give some thought. All right, which of these is a true South African endemic? So the bird on the left is a Coqui franklin. The bird in the middle is a gray-winged franklin, and the bird on the right is a crested franklin. And the only one that is entirely restricted to South Africa is gray-winged franklin. All right, this eBird distribution map reflects a bird species that is an intra-African migrant from Central Africa, breeding exclusively in Southern Africa. So I mentioned rufous-cheeked nightjar, which might be something that crossed your mind, but the name of this bird gives it away almost entirely. It is a South African cliff swallow and is known to breed only in South Africa. and actually very, very common. So in summer, there are bridges and culverts, particularly areas around Joburg and south of Joburg, that this bird is very, very easy to find. This is a true South African endemic, and it is the very skulky, very hard to find Knysna warbler. And then of these 3 bird species, one does not occur, well, occurs in Zimbabwe and Mozambique, but occurs outside those regions as well. So the first one is a Cherinda Palace, and you can see it does occur in Gorongosa, but does not occur outside of that range at all. Robert's warbler occurs also restricted to that border between Mozambique and Zimbabwe. And then the one on the left-hand side is Swinnerton's robin, and as you can see, it occurs in Tanzania as well. And therefore, the answer to this question is Swinnerton's robin. All right, and which of these long-billed larks does not occur in South Africa at all? And it's not Eastern long-billed lark, that's the distribution of Eastern long-billed lark. Karoo long-billed lark goes into Namibia. Cape long-billed lark is a slightly debatable one. I'm not sure that eBird map is 100% correct, particularly that far northern bird. But there are some potential Cape long-billed larks that cross the border into Namibia. So it's not a true South African endemic, but it's quite close. Agulhas long-billed lark is an absolute true South African endemic, only occurring down in the Southern Cape, mostly in the Agulhas area around Bredasdorp and Arniston. It shows on this eBird map that it occurs close to Cape Town, but it's just the granularity of the map that's causing that confusion. It certainly doesn't occur anywhere near Cape Town. And so the correct answer is Benguela long-billed lark, which is restricted to Namibia and southern Angola, and so it doesn't get anywhere near South Africa at all. All right, some slightly more off-the-wall questions. I think I might have asked this question in the past, but I hope some of you remember it, and then you can get it right. So who played the main role as a drag queen in the movie The Birdcage? An extinct bird species fulfills the role of a fictional character in Lewis Carroll's 1865 book, Alice in Wonderland. Which bird species is that? And it's got quite an interesting derivation as to where the name comes from. All right, so this is a slightly complicated question. I'll read it quickly. In Act 3, Scene 5 of Romeo and Juliet, the two protagonists are lying together after sharing a forbidden night in Juliet's bedroom. Romeo hears a bird singing and warns that it is heralding the coming of the morning. He is anxious to leave because he is worried about being caught, which would mean both of their deaths. Juliet argues that the bird singing is something different, and the bird she thinks is singing means it is still nighttime and they still have time together. For a single point, name at least one of the birds they are referring to. Bear in mind that Romeo and Juliet was written by William Shakespeare, who lived in Europe. So we're looking for European bird species here, but I will be quite generous in particularly the one bird. Okay, and then I'm just getting my phone ready because I need to play you a song. So I'm going to play a song now, and I want to know what the name of the song is and the artist for a single point. You need to get both. I cannot guarantee the sound quality, so I'll play about a minute of it. And if you can give me the name of the song and the artist, and it obviously has a bird reference. So here goes. I apologize for the lack of quality of sound. All right, before it gives it away, that is the song. It's quite noisy at the beginning, but it's a great song, and sadly the artist is no longer with us. He passed away a few years ago. So the oldies should know this one. In fact, my generation, but I am an oldie now, so you should know that one as well. The youngsters might struggle a little bit, so I need the artist and the name of the song. All right, which of these songs is sung by the Beatles? No Egrets, Rockin' Robin, Blackbird, He Ain't Heavy, He's My Plover. So a little bit of poetic license with a few of those. It should narrow it down a little bit. So I need to know which of A, B, C, or D was a song sung by the Beatles. All right, and let's have some answers. Okay, who played the main role as a drag queen in the movie The Birdcage? That was, of course, Robin Williams. It seems like I've got a thing for artists that have passed away. So obviously Robin Williams passed away a number of years ago as well. But if you haven't seen The Birdcage, it is well worth watching. It's a pretty good movie. And then this one, the extinct bird species that fulfills the role of a fictional character in Alice in Wonderland, that bird species is a dodo. And the derivation of that, it's a little bit anecdotal. It may not necessarily be true, but it appears in chapters 2 and 3. So the book was written by Charles Lutwidge Dodgson. Sorry, Lewis Carroll's name is actually Charles Lutwidge Dodgson. Lewis Carroll was a nom de plume. So the dodo is a caricature of the author in that it is believed that he chose that animal to represent himself because of his stammer, and thus would accidentally introduce himself as Dodgson. And that's where the character of a dodo comes from. I know it's not necessarily true, but it's a great story. So there you go. All right, so Act 3, Scene 5 of Romeo and Juliet. Romeo was quite keen to make a getaway before the dawn had come. He thought he heard a bird singing, heralding the day. And Juliet seemed to think that it was a night bird that was still singing. So which birds were they talking about? I think it's possible to actually derive this even if you don't know. So Juliet thought it was a common nightingale, which is a bird singing at nighttime, and she thought that they still had some time together, whereas Romeo thought it was a Eurasian skylark or a lark or a skylark. If you give me lark, I will accept that as an answer. So the larks sing at dawn, and so Romeo was quite concerned that there was a skylark singing, and it was time for him to take his leave before they got caught and put to death. All right, so the song and artist for a single point. I'm not going to play the song again, but the artist is Prince, and the song is, of course, When Doves Cry. I'm sure that wasn't the dove that he was referring to. That's a tambourine dove photographed in Newlands Forest, which is a really cool bird to see just around the corner from where we are now. And pretty terrible song titles I've given there, but it might have helped you get the answer, which is the song by the Beatles is Blackbird. All right, so that brings us to the end of Birds and Entertainment. And now back to some ID questions. This is always a favorite section of mine. This is really just an introductory slide. That's a Boehm's bee eater photographed along the Zambezi River in Mozambique, in the hottest place in the world, a place called Senna. And I've just shown you the way I'm going to ask these questions. I'm going to show you a little snippet of a bird photograph. And based on that, you're going to tell me what it is. So there's the first one. So identify this bird. I'm sorry, the quality is not great, but when zooming in on bird photographs, you do get quite a lot of pixelation. So what is this bird? That very distinctive barring and sort of the greenish mantle and upper parts and wings. What is that? And I would like you to use the correct name for this bird. If you give me the old name, you can get half a point. What is this particular bird species? This bird also has an old name, but is now commonly known as something else. What is this bird? This one is bound to cause a degree of confusion, but that's the whole reason it's been included. So what bird has this spotting on its breast? Very, very nice cryptic coloring on this particular bird species. The actual photograph of its feathers may even be more beautiful than the bird itself. And then finally, what is this particular bird species? Definitely has a number of confusion candidates, but I think there's enough on that photograph to show you what it is. All right, magnifying glass answers. So the first bird is a green-winged Pytilia. So if you gave me Melba Finch, you can have half a mark. But I did give you the clue with the green wings, so that should have helped you. This particular bird is a wonderful Namibian Angolan endemic, which is rock runner. And I think if I'm not mistaken, it used to be called a Damara rock jumper or Damara rock runner. Then bird number 3, this is potentially the most confusing of the 5. It can range from a raptor to a passerine. Some people might have thought African goshawk or little sparrow hawk, but in fact, it is a ground scraper thrush. And then this one, don't think there's too many confusion species, but the sort of zoomed in nature of the photograph makes it quite tricky. But that's the beautiful plumage of a double-banded courser. And then finally, I guess you could have, you can see it's a wader based on those long legs, walking through some grass. And many people might have thought it's a ruff, but in fact it is the very special buff-breasted sandpiper that was quite reliably found at Mpempe Pan in northern KZN or in Zululand. And we had some really nice photographic opportunities of this very, very special bird. All right, this new category of mine called bum shots. Often when I'm processing my photos, I have some really lousy ones, which I generally delete, but I've decided that they're worth keeping, particularly for this particular section of the quiz, because there are still features on a bird that you can't see the whole of it, that you can narrow it down and identify it. So there are certainly enough features on these photographs that allow you to identify the bird. This is, of course, a female Swi waxbill, and this is not a true bum shot because you can see almost all the features you need to. Let's go on to the actual ones. Right. This is a lousy bum shot of a South African bird species. What is it? So it may seem very tricky, but there is certainly enough on that photograph to narrow down exactly what it is. This is a very attractive bird that one would see on a pelagic trip. And so what is this particular bird species? The patterns on the wings are very distinctive, particularly when you see them out at sea. This bird turned its head at just the right time as I was taking photographs of it. Fortunately, it gave me an opportunity to get a photo of it facing me. But there's enough on this bird species. Even the habitat might give you an indication. If I'm not mistaken, it's a yellowwood tree. It's a bird of the Afromontane forests. So what is this bird species? This one's just a slightly awkward angle, makes the bird look like it has no tail, but it just was in a very strong wind. What is that particular bird species? And then the hardest one of the lot, this is a bird photographed in some woodland, very LBJ-ish. So there's enough on that particular photograph to narrow it down to a particular species. So what is that bird species? Okay, here come your bum shot answers. The giveaway on this, you could think Cape White-eye, but a Cape White-eye does not have a sort of a rufous brown head. So that would have ruled that one out. I guess there are some canaries that might look like that, but this bird is very specifically a yellow-throated woodland warbler. So it's interesting how gray the bird looks from behind. When you see it from the front, it's very yellow, and you can see that brown crown gives it away. This particular bird is a Sabine's gull, and there's no mistaking it when you see it out at sea with those beautiful black and white wings. So the black primaries and the white secondaries, and those gray coverts. And then this bird is one of my favorite birds on the planet. It's the endemic bush blackcap, and fortunately it did turn and face me and give a little song at the same time, and really a nice bird to photograph at eye level, but not that easy to do. And then this one is a plain-back pipit. You've had a photo of a plain-back pipit already. I think the giveaways here are the relatively plain-backed, which is not that easy to see with the feathers ruffled, but it has also very plain breasts. Plain-back pipits do have very plain breasts. You could have seen the yellow lower mandible as well, which would have given it away as a plain-back pipit. If you were not on pipit at all, then it might have been tricky. It could have been confused as a long claw, but just not colorful enough to be even a young long claw, which often has quite a lot of yellow in it. And then this one, really, really tough. It's a bird that you'll find in the woodlands where there's often quite sandy soil substrate. The rufous panel in the wing gives it away. It's not a rufous nape lark, which has a rufous panel in the wing. The The streaking on the crown, I mean, it's not a rufous-naped lark, and I think the habitat also, you can see the woodland leaf litter and that sandy soil means it is a fawn-colored lark. Really a lousy photograph, but you can see the features of fawn-colored lark there. So very, very well done to anyone who got that one, because that certainly was the most difficult out of the 5. Okay, and then we move on to our second last category, which is it's all in a name. And you know that I'm a stickler for the names, and I don't call them the new names because they've been around for a very long time. But let's see how we do with bird names. This used to be called a grey-headed parrot, which was originally split from the endemic Cape parrots, and sadly, likely, there's a possibility they might lump them. It now has a name that is potentially very confusing given the name of one of our other Southern African parrot species. So what is the current name of this bird? It is not a grey-headed parrot. It's not a Cape parrot either, but what is it is a grey-headed parrot, but what is the new name or the current name for a grey-headed parrot? This bird was photographed on the Zambezi River near Vic Falls. Okay, I always throw in one of these. How many Southern African bird species have the word violet in them? So you can do it from first principles, and you can think through all the bird species you know that have the word violet in them, or you can just have a full-on guess. Right, this bird is an African paradise flycatcher, and we refer to it as an intra-African migrant. So it migrates from Central Africa down to Southern Africa, most of the time breeding down in Southern Africa. In parts of Southern Africa, it actually is resident throughout the year, but the ones we see in Cape Town are certainly migrants. And you can see that eBird map shows the extent of its migration into the north. And then you get a bird like this lesser grey shrike, which is a migrant of a different name. So it migrates from the largest of the 8 biogeographic realms on Earth. So that red distribution in the top photograph, that's not the distribution of the lesser grey shrike, that's the region I'm talking about. And this region gives it the name of what kind of migrant it is. So what kind of migrant is a lesser grey shrike? Right, what is the name of this attractive duck? And I think you'll all know that I need to know what the current name of this attractive duck is, not any of its previous names. So if you give me something that is not exactly current, you will get 0, because it is a very, very important and principled name change. And I need to know what the new name of this duck is. It's a relatively new change. The IOC, and I've checked this, it is officially now called something different to what it was at least a year or maybe 2 years ago. So what is the name of this attractive duck? And I've really given it all away there, but I think you should all know where I'm going with that. Okay, so this is a complicated and involved question. So common English bird names usually consist of a family name and then a description of that family name to narrow it down to certain species. So here we've got a bird called a black bee-eater. So it's a bee-eater by family, and then it has a descriptor, which is black. So you sometimes have birds that have multiple descriptors. So orange-breasted sunbird, for example, has orange-breasted as the descriptor, and then the family name is sunbird. So scientific names are far more consistent in that they have a genus name, which is the second word that comes, the genus name comes first, and then a species name, which is the descriptor, essentially. And that's from the Linnaean system of classification. So a black bee-eater is Merops, which is the scientific name for the family of this particular bee-eater, and Gularis is the descriptor. So that narrows it down to a species level. And scientific names are very specific in that they are only 2 words. If you're going to bring in subspecies, you'll have a third name which describes the subspecies. There's a bird that we see in Southern Africa who has a genus name Daptian, which is an anagram of its common name descriptor. What is that bird? So the word Daptian, if you work out the anagram of that, it is the descriptor in its common name. And there is a bit of debate about that because its common name has been changed. So we still call it based on the anagram of Daptian, but the rest of the world seems to have moved on to a different word. So what is that? It's a very complicated question. I think it might be one of those questions that you either know the answer to it or you don't, but it is quite a cool coincidence in that Daptian is the anagram of its common name. All right, so here come the answers. By the way, this bird is a yellow-throated bush sparrow, which used to be a yellow-throated Petronia. It is no longer even in the genus of Petronia, so they had to change it, yellow-throated bush sparrow, and this bird was photographed at Eco Reflections Reserve, which is in Wilderness, so quite a nice rare bird. Okay, this bird is now called a brown-necked parrot, which makes it very confusing because we have a brown-headed parrot, and when I'm in the field, I certainly get them confused. I often call the brown-headed parrot a brown-necked parrot and vice versa. All right, how many Southern African bird species have the word violet in them? All right, violet-backed starling, that would probably be the easy one. The second one is western violet-backed sunbird, which is a very, very tricky bird to find in the Miombo of Zimbabwe and Mozambique. The third is violet-eared waxbill. This is a nice male violet-eared waxbill. And then the fourth one is violet woodhoopoo, which is a bird that you find in Namibia. So the answer to this question is 4. You could have just guessed that, or you could have gone through first principles and thought of all the birds that have the word violet in them. Okay, this bird is a lesser grey shrike, and we refer to it as a Palearctic migrant, not an intra-African migrant. And the name of this attractive duck is a blue-billed teal. And then you either know it or you don't. Daptian is an anagram for the word pintado. So pintado petrel is Daptian capensi, and many people around the world, many of the lists have now changed the name pintado petrel to Cape petrel. I'm not a sort of someone who hangs on to old names, but I do think pintado being, I think it's Spanish for painted, is a far more appropriate name for pintado petrel. Right, here's the potluck section, and I haven't thrown in any international bird questions, but this is one of the greatest birds on the planet. This is an Inca tern photographed near Peru, well, in Peru near Lima, at a place called Pucosana. Certainly the most attractive tern that exists, and just a real exciting bird to see. They're quite common, so if you go to Lima, you will see an Inca tern, but nice to get a decent photograph of it. Okay, so 63 African penguins were found dead at Boulders Beach on the 17th of September 2021. How did they die? It was a great mystery, but then they did some autopsies and they discovered that they all died from the same affliction. What was that? Probably in the category of high grade. I would criticize myself for only allocating half a point for each of these, because these are very tricky ID questions. So if you can get them, you've done extremely well, but at least you'll learn something if you don't get them. What are these two raptors? There's absolutely no relationship between them, but I just thought I haven't got any true raptor questions in this quiz. So identify each of these raptors for half a point each. All right, this is a Google Maps image of the little sort of seaside town of Sandbaai. I guess Sandbaai and Fisher Haven and Onrus and Hermanus are all sort of attached to one another now, but this was in the sort of section called Sandbaai. There was a bird that was temporarily resident in this little fynbos park. Very atypical habitat. I guess when you got to see the bird, you'd understand why it was there. But what was the bird that was found in this particular fynbos park? The person who found the bird lived in this little house, or big house, and noticed a very strange bird in that wetland. What was that bird? And this is, I guess I do have an international question, but it is so worth it for this bird species. And thank you to Jonathan Newman, who photographed these, works for a bird guiding company, and I saw these photos of his on Facebook, and I decided I had to ask a quiz question on this. This is one of the world's top birds, and if you don't know that it's one of the world's top birds, if you ask any top birder in the world, they would agree with that. It's very, very difficult to find. It's quite erratic and unpredictable, but they breed on these river banks on the Congo River, in the Congo Basin in Gabon, and they do come down to coastal Gabon as well. and they are very, very enigmatic. So no one really knows the true nature of their movements. What is this wonderful bird called? It has a close relative that is actually resident in Southeast Asia and is actually believed to be extinct. I don't think there's been a sighting of it for a very, very long time. And then the last question is related to this particular object coming out of the backside of this young bird or nestling. I'd like to know what the technical name for this thing is that's coming out of its bum, and poo does not count. And I guess given how tough a year or 2 years we've had with all this COVID drama, it's probably an appropriate way to finish the quiz. What is that thing coming out of the bum of this nestling paradise flycatcher? Right, here you go. Here are the answers. So these African penguins were discovered to have died from a bee sting. So there was obviously a swarm of bees that went through the colony. And the last thing we can afford is for these penguins to die from these bizarre manners, because they are under huge threat from a whole bunch of other things. These are two very difficult raptors to identify. The bird on the left is obviously a juvenile bird. And I guess the confusion species are little sparrow hawk versus African goshawk. I can confirm that this is a little sparrow hawk. African goshawk has a gray cere, whereas this has got a very, very bright yellow cere. So this is a little sparrow hawk. The bird on the right is an extremely special bird. It was photographed in the Caprivi, quite near Rundu. And it's a pretty exciting bird to find just about anywhere. This is a young bird and not often seen in this particular plumage. And that's an Ayres's hawk eagle. So if you got those two right, you've done extremely well. The bird that we all went to go see in this famous wetland was this wonderful sub-adult dwarf bittern, and it was very obliging for a couple of days, and a lot of people got to see it, and then it disappeared. It pitched up in Ornris for a brief moment and then never to be seen again. So who knows where it eventually ended up. And then this bird is just certainly a bird that I want to see in my lifetime. It is called an African river martin. And then the very last question, this thing coming out of the bum of this paradise flycatcher is called a fecal sac. So it's a great evolutionary development where it avoids the nests of birds being littered with excrement. So the adult bird will remove the fecal sac right from the fecal sac coming out of the anus, and it'll take it away and dispose of it somewhere so it doesn't dirty the nest. So that is the last question, and you should have all your scores aside from the anagrams. So if you want to spend some more time on the anagrams, then pause and spend some time with those letters. But otherwise, I'm going to go into the answers for the anagrams. So this is taken in a place called Iba Rock Painting Lodge, which is in the Orongo Mountains in central Namibia. And it must rate as one of the best places in the world to see heartlobe spurfowl. Fortunately, these birds were not in the greatest light, so it's a bit soft, but that is a heartlobe spurfowl, and that is the first anagram. Our second anagram, maybe slightly tricky, very long name, and most commonly seen in these alien stands, and there is a pair of them that is currently nesting and raising 2 young chicks on the Rondebosch Common in a stand of pines. And earlier this season, when they were still mating and displaying, they gave some amazing photographic opportunities, and this is one of the photographs that I was lucky enough to get. So all those children in the audience can avert their eyes. Fab Farthest Tucked is a simple off-street chat. So this particular photograph was taken on one of those rocks that's actually in the photograph. So the photograph was taken exactly where the bird is known to occur. And then Tipple Wisely Aborted is a high altitude grassland endemic yellow-breasted pipit, not a very easy bird to find at all, but fortunately managed to see a few in the Miamul area. And then Blonde Practice Walking, that floodplain over there is a wonderful place to see these very attractive migrants, which are black-winged pratincoles, highly endangered birds, habitat loss, and agriculture and farming have reduced their habitat enormously, but they still are seen in quite big flocks. We saw an amazing flock of these birds on the Homo floodplain in February this year. So that brings me to the end of the 2021 quiz. I would like to thank everybody for their attention. I hope you enjoyed it online as much as we enjoyed it in a live setting, and no more appropriate bird to finish off with than this Christmas bird, I call it now. It's got this beautiful green and red, and certainly reminds us of the Christmas colors. So thank you very much, everybody, and I hope you enjoyed the quiz. And I'm going to stop the recording now and have a wonderful Christmas and festive season if you don't celebrate Christmas, and look forward to hopefully seeing all of you face to face in the years to come.